Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm joined here. Today we're going to be talking about Vedic astrology. I do need a haircut. Let's get myself a little bit more camera. There you go. And I'm here with a special guest. I was here with a special guest, Marbles, but she's decided to take off into the ether, and I can't say I blame her. Um, okay, so my name's Gary Gomes. I'm here to talk about Vedic astrology. The other day, I actually did a video and I was joking around and saying the moon was in Purna Rasu, which usually means you have to do things twice. And guess what? I'm having to redo the video. So it's on purpose. It was an accident, but it also proves to a certain extent that astrology does work, so, even if it's due to my incompetence. The other thing is, I have been a practicing Vedic astrologer for 30 years. I have been the president of the Council of Vedic Astrology. Have written articles in Modern Astrologer. Uh, I'm known in several countries and have visited several countries to talk about Vedic astrology. So that's enough. Um, and I have been recognized in India as a Vedic astrologer, although remotely. So, so um, I'm here to talk to you about Vedic astrology. I'm going to talk a little bit about Chinese astrology before I give you a full-blown interpretation of the year in the next broadcast. I know I promised it for this one, but there is a couple of changes that happened that I'd like to talk with you about this time. Also, the broadcast will probably be split into two segments, one in which I talk about the world as a whole, then bring it back home to your individual signs. So, and it's mainly because I'm running into a time constraint here. So I will definitely be doing a full hour, uh, thanks to Greater New Bedford Cable. And also, this will be on YouTube. So please, we are trying to expand the channel. We're trying to make it a much more professional channel. Uh, Part of that's my fault entirely, mainly because I have been involved in an exterior project which has taken up a great deal of my time. And so the space that I want to use for the astrology broadcast and podcast is not quite ready yet, but it will be very, very soon. I am teaching Vedic astrology at Kepler College. You can visit their site. Kepler's been around for a long time, over 20 years. It's an internationally recognized school of astrology. It's really, really, they have excellent faculty, not only in Vedic, but in other schools of astrology. And I do tutor students individually and for Dyra Academy. And I'm giving a shout out to my friend Roland in the Netherlands. But also, I am in the process of building my own school, and I do plan to make it the largest Vedic astrology school in the world over time. So that having been said, and without further ado, let's see what's happening astrologically today. As always, I will include a little bit of astrology knowledge in the forecast, which means I'll talk about the nakshatras and the Navamsa chart. And I've been doing it deliberately. Hopefully this will share. Let me see if this shares again. This was the problem the last time it didn't share, and hopefully this will share. I'm going to stop it and restart it. Okay, so I apologize for this. Okay, so I apologize for that little bit of geekery, but I'm trying to make sure that we don't run into the same problem we did on Tuesday. Hopefully we won't, because one of the things I want to talk about today is the fact that Mercury has finally come out of retrograde this past weekend, which is always a little bit of a relief. Mercury retrograde is, apart from the full moon and eclipses, those are usually the main astrological um, main parts of astrology, and also their sun sign that most people know about uh, in the general public. So everybody says, well, oh, Mercury retrograde, that's why things are screwed up, or I can't sign a contract because it's Mercury retrograde, or I can't do this because it's Mercury retrograde, etc., etc. Um, there's a bit of truth to all those things. However, Mercury retrograde is not a showstopper. It's a it affects communications. This particular Mercury retrograde has been very difficult because Mercury's been placed between it's been placed in the same sign with Saturn, and I don't know if you can see the numbers where you are, but Saturn's at 13 degrees 58 minutes, Mercury's at 18 degrees 1 minute. Mercury moves extremely fast. This past weekend and into Monday and Tuesday, Mercury was almost right on top of Saturn. And although Saturn and Mercury are considered friends in Vedic astrology, or at least neutral to each other, Mercury has a somewhat ambivalent relationship with Jupiter, and Jupiter tends to, and it's locked in between. They have this condition in Vedic astrology called hemming or Katari. So usually it's negative if it's a negative planet on one side and a positive and a negative planet on the other side. So that would be Mars and Saturn um, clustering, or on either side of Mercury. In this case, it isn't so much a negative planet, but we have a weak planet uh, on the other side of Mercury. That is Jupiter. Jupiter's very weak in the sign. It's at 21 degrees. If we go down to the Navamsha, which is a little bit of an offset, it's exalted in the Navamsha, but it's also with Rahu. So essentially, what that means in plain English is this debilitation of Jupiter gets canceled, but it's also a bit panicky or um, confused. It's amped up because Rahu essentially tends to make us a little bit more um, anxious about things. Its major problem is to produce anxiety or produce confusion and dissatisfaction about things. So you have Jupiter with Rahu, even though Jupiter's in an exalted sign in the Vamsha chart, it'll tend to cause some problems with Jupiter's signification. So you'll have what I would call, we have a lot of hyper militarism going on right now, especially in the United States. Now, this particular combination of Jupiter and Cancer didn't happen overnight in the Navamsha chart, and it's not going to stay there forever. But you will see over the next few weeks at least um, more, I would say, more irrational thinking about security and more paranoia about security and patriotism. And also, if you look over here in the Navamsha chart, which is one of the first times I'm getting into the Navamsha chart when I'm doing one of these readings, is that Mars is aspecting Jupiter too, and Mars is exalted in this chart. And Mars is with Ketu, so this extreme, what I would call extreme reaction to people being willing to speak, people being able to speak. And also, if Saturn has just passed over, if Mercury has just passed over Saturn, it's going to make people afraid of allowing other people to express themselves. Now, again, I see my guest host is back. Now, again, I understand the foundation of that. I'm not, I don't live in a shell. I live in the real world. And I've seen what's happened over the past few months, but I've also seen this same kind of thing happening really over the past year or so. And so what we have is and it's hard, we have large segments of our population kind of freaked out. And I would say paranoid or afraid of each other. When that happens, and this won't be a permanent state, when that happens, you're going to see people jump to the wrong conclusions, jump to um, I'm going to come right on and say it, suppression rather than dialogue. Okay, so I think that's one thing we should all be really careful about over the next few months. I think what we need to do is try to listen to each other and listen to our perspective and not just assume that people want to hurt us or damage us from either side, because I hear it from both sides. I hear it from the more conservative people. I hear it from the more liberal people that there's an attempt to destroy people, and I don't even think that's true. I think people are afraid of losing what they have. They're afraid of attack. They're afraid of everything they know being wiped out. And that's that Jupiter Rahu conjunction. It's will my traditions, will my beliefs be attacked? K2 Mars is exalted in the sign. Well, the guy and the sun is in the same sign with it in the Navamsha. The government has to do something, or the government has to be destroyed. Now, again, I'm not advocating for any of these positions. I don't want to get blocked. And the other thing that you want to look at is that when people stop thinking rationally, they start acting stupidly. So we all need, if we were in school, we would all need a timeout right now. And but that Jupiter and Rahu conjunction is going to make us more anxious. It'll last for a little while, maybe for about another couple of months. Then you'll start to see people getting a little bit less anxious. Also, given the fact that we have um, vaccines now, I think one of the best things that can happen to allay um, any kind of violence or allay any kind of aggravation is for people to get back to work. Because I've been around a long time, I saw a lot of the the social unrest in the 1960s. I didn't grow up in the middle of it, but I saw it happening around me. And a lot of that happened, especially in urban centers, because people were out of work. People need work. People need to get back to work. People need jobs. So if we're looking at the chart, this is a reasonably good chart, but it indicates a slow climb. We're probably not going to really get to a stage where the economy is going to start to feel a little bit more secure until about late April. And I think also because of what's happening with the vaccines, and also because the sun's inside of Vishak Nakshatra, which is connected with healing and connected with a lot of doctors, we're going to see more and more vaccines. The third vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, has, I think it's, there's a report that's just come on it. This is February 25th, 2021, and it looks like that's going to be approved. And one of the nice things about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is apparently there have been no deaths connected with it. So people who actually catch the illness, they tend to bounce back. Okay, so you have three potent vaccines out right now. There's another. The other one in Europe is not. I don't know if it's available in the United States or not. Um, it's not as effective as Pfizer and Moderna, but it is available. And There have been reports that the spread of the disease are slowing down, but they're plateauing, and so are the vaccination levels. So essentially what that means in plain English is they're not getting worse, but they're not getting better. So there was a time that when the rate of infection was going like it was almost like a mountain. You just went like that, and then it went down. But now it seems to be stuck at this kind of a level, and that's the Mercury. So when Mercury starts to go into Aquarius, which will be in about 12 days at the outside, you'll start to see more and more, I would say, more decline. The other thing that we're looking at is, in terms of world events, communications will still be a problem over the next month or so. And that's mainly because Mercury is still pretty afflicted. It's in the 8th house from Gemini, which is the sign of communications. As I'm talking to you today, the moon is in a Shlesha nakshatra, so there's a lot of sneakiness going around. I should watch out. My Ketu is in that nakshatra. But essentially, moon in a Shlesha nakshatra is kind of interesting because it's a little bit, it does what it needs to advance itself, and that's fine. The Mars Rahu combination, though, always makes people a little trigger happy, and there'll probably be panic and fear of earthquakes over the next few months. So I think those are going to be the kinds of things. Mars and Rahu are in earth signs. K2 is in a water sign, so we can have some water disasters too. But this is also a disease carrier, so that's where a lot of the variants are coming from, is from K2 being in Scorpio. And also, Jupiter is not going to be really well placed. Jupiter is essentially the planet that gives most people, Jupiter and Venus give most people hope. Venus is extremely well placed right now. It's at 6 degrees, 6 minutes of Aquarius, and that's a really good sign placement for it. It loves being in Aquarius. And so you'll start to see some hope and some new vaccinations start to come out within the next month or so. The other thing is, though, the economy is still kind of in a drag. It'll be in kind of a drag until around the end of April, and you'll start to see more confidence develop, I would say, in April, May at the latest. The other thing is, from the chart, so we're going to go to the world chart in a second. I've spoken about Mars, I've spoken about the moon, I've spoken about K2, I've spoken about Saturn. Saturn's in Capricorn, so I wouldn't expect governments to liberalize or move more quickly than they have been for about another 2 months or so. And that's mainly because Jupiter can't get enough steam in order to be generous with people and in order to be kind and generous with people. So it'll be a slow build-up, but it'll happen nonetheless. Jupiter is past its maximum point of debilitation. That's good, and I think what you'll see is a lot of progress over the next few months in terms of both virus vaccination dissemination and also even in terms of economies recovering. So that's good news. But there will be scandals connected with government. We've already seen them in connection with certain governors across the country, and we've also seen it in various other countries around the world. So I'm going to look over to the world map, and we'll cover that part. Then I'll go back. After I cover that part, I'm going to stop the video and then tape the second part later. All right, so we have Saturn, Mercury, and Jupiter are all placed over sort of like to the west of Texas. We do have a Rahu line going through Texas right now. Interestingly enough, Rahu is connected with gas. It's connected with it's the gaseous element. It's air. It's almost all air or anxiety or worry. And the other day when I looked at it, we had Saturn in this a Saturn line passing through Texas and into Louisiana, and that's the gas prices they're experiencing there. We also have Saturn, Mercury, and Jupiter in the western part of the United States, and also we have, I need to move this little guy down here. We also have a moon line running right next to, right over New Mexico. So essentially, these states up through Idaho and through around Middle Canada and over the Baja region and western Mexico will be having problems with energy matters, with the economy, especially in Arizona, and with communications, especially in New Mexico and through Idaho, or Montana, excuse me, Montana and Idaho. Also, you'll see Nevada having some problems as well with this economy. And I'll pass through. It looks like the middle part of the country is in fairly good shape. We have Wisconsin down through Louisiana. Looks like it's in fairly good shape. Although Venus is in combustion, I hadn't mentioned that before. Venus is in combustion until May, so that'll make relationship life difficult for most people. But we'll get into that when we get into the more personal side of the horoscope. And Sun is in the Midwest, so there'll be a lot of attention focused on Louisiana, Alabama, up through Kentucky, up through Michigan. And we don't have any lines over Washington, D.C. A lot of the lines are, as we move over here, the country that looks to be in most trouble right now is, the other day it was Brazil, but right now it looks to be Peru and Argentina. Peru, Chile, and Argentina. So they'll have some danger of earthquakes or some danger um, of water-based disasters. There's a Mars line coming close to Iceland and close to Ireland, but not really connecting with either country. There is a Venus line running through Iceland, which is okay. It's not really going to do anything that bad. And we have a Mars. That Mars line, though, can produce some disputes, especially over land and property, especially in Western Africa. And the Venus line will give some disputes over water and the economy in Ireland and through Spain and through roughly not Morocco but Libya and that part of Africa all the way through Gabon. And there's a Rahu line going through Norway. So this is going to sound weird, but essentially there'll be panic and fear and frustration in Norway, Denmark, Germany, Switzerland, Italy, and down to down through northern Africa, all the way down. Also, I'm looking for other lines. Turkey seems to be Turkey in the Middle East and Eastern Africa. There doesn't seem to be a lot of planetary activity there. If any karma happens there, will be as a result of individual charts of the countries, not the current transits. So basically, this part of the world looks unafflicted at this time, or uninfluenced at this time. So any problems they'll be making will be made. They won't be inevitabilities. They'll just be sort of like things that are happening to them. India is having problems. It had problems near Delhi in the last map I looked at. Also a little bit to the west of India, as well as, I believe, Pakistan and this area, and up here into central Russia, we'll be having some issues with the economy and droughts and failure to deliver supplies. There'll be, again, ongoing violence in Myanmar, maybe tipping not quite into India, but certainly adjacent to India. And you have a Rahu line going through Southeast Asia up through central China. So China's going to be in a little bit of trouble this year. Not necessarily economic trouble, but I would say more domestic trouble. They'll be having some problems with their citizens, um, and also with countries to the immediate south like Vietnam and Cambodia. The other areas of the world, Japan looks pretty much in the clear. It had its earthquake. It looks pretty much in the clear right now. The other parts of the world which are having some problems right now are Australia, Eastern Australia, excuse me, um, New Guinea, and some of the smaller islands off the coast over here. And finally, there's a Venus line which is going close to New Zealand. New Zealand looks like it doesn't have any problems going on right now. So, and as a matter of fact, New Zealand's been largely fortunate in the pandemic over the past few months. And it's mainly because it's had, at least from an astrological perspective, it isn't the government, it isn't the uh, the wonderful governing system. It's really a lack of planetary interference. That lack of planetary interference can actually help them um, elect good representatives. But I think what you're going to see is essentially over the next few years is the United States will be in sort of like a period of recovery for roughly about 2 years. It's not going to spring back as quickly as I hoped, although I think you're going to see a lot of gross domestic product growth this year. But it'll still be about 2 years before we're really able to get out of this. And had we had a different approach to this earlier on, I'm not so sure that would have happened. But um, we've seen slow movement so far, and it's consistent with both the current U.S. president's chart and the chart of the United States. So I'm not picking on President Biden. Essentially, the way I judge the chart, the United States is in a Saturn subperiod. Things recover slowly in Saturn subperiods. It's not even something I can attribute to the leadership. It's just that things will move slowly, but they will recover, and I think you will see after the end of April. I do think you'll see sort of what I would call a V-shaped recovery, but it'll be more like a checkmark V, so like one of these that I can do. Um, so the downturn will be like this, and the upturn will be like or a wider range. Okay, so instead of a V this morning, it's more. I'm sorry for doing this. It's more like that. It'll be more like okay, but it'll come back. The United States economy always does, and I think overall, I'm looking for some other spots I'd be a little bit worried about. Some potential for um, land disruption off the coast of Africa or sea disruption. And what I mean by that is some potential for shipping disasters or earthquakes off the coast of Africa. Um, and also, um, yeah, so this is the more exact spot down here, like close, you know, in some ways closer to South America than to Africa, but almost like midway between the two parts of the world. And I think really if I were looking at the United States, I'd be most concerned about about California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas, um, and maybe a little bit of Louisiana. Louisiana's not really so bad, um, and maybe a little bit of Alabama and through Michigan. Um, but the rest of the country doesn't look bad. It looks like what I would call um, regular weather. At least in the chart, that's where I see the issues coming up right now. Myanmar, the interesting thing about Myanmar is I don't think you're going to see um, this resistance to the coup and easily or quickly. Whether or not they're going to win and make the coup back off, I don't know. I haven't looked carefully enough at Myanmar's chart. Um, but that I think it's interesting that there is a lot of resistance because of the just show this. Uh, Not because that never happens. I mean, it happened in Turkey a few years ago. But it's interesting to happen in that military coups aren't seeming to have the same staying power as they once had. They're not as inevitable as they once were. So in some ways, I think that's a really good thing. And in many ways, I think that's a really good thing. All right, so that'll be it for this segment of the program. I'll come back and I'll look at individual horoscopes for the second half. Like I said, just because of time constraints. And again, um, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like, comment, try to spread it around. And I will get to some more interesting things about Jyotish, but I did introduce you at least to the concept of looking at the Navamsha as an additional component of analysis, and that's a really important component of analysis in Indian astrology. Okay, so I'm going to go off right now and come back and finish up. Thank you very much, everyone. Peace, and we'll see you soon. Namaste. End of part one.